Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I'd like to go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to this evening's Farminar. Tonight's topic is budgeting for success, adding a new generation to a row crop and livestock operation. The Farminar tonight will be presented by Wendy and Erwin Johnson of Centerview Farms near Charles City. I'm your host for this evening, Drake Larson from Practical Farmers of Iowa, and I'm filling in tonight for Luke Grand, who is the regular Farminar host but is on a well-deserved vacation. Before we begin, I'd like to just tell you a bit about Practical Farmers of Iowa. Our Farminars, like the one that you're tuning into this evening, are one of the many ways that we strive to put farmers in touch with other farmers in order that they share information together, with this idea that we can all learn from each other and that no one knows farming better than farmers. You can see on the calendar here that this evening is the second to last Farminar in the winter series. There will be a short break, and then we'll have a spring series of Farminars to be announced shortly, if spring ever comes. And so this idea of sharing knowledge is something that's at the core of Practical Farmers of Iowa. We believe that there is room for all sorts of farmers in Iowa agriculture, and indeed, having a diversity of farmers and a diversity of farm types is key to sustainable agriculture. We hope to share the sort of information that farmers need to be both economically and ecologically viable. Our members often tell us that the sense of community that they feel at PFI events and through relationships that they build through Practical Farmers is one of the most valuable things that we have to offer. Much of the information that we share is free, including the Farminar series tonight and the vast library of research reports which we've gathered over the years. But if you like what we have to offer, we'd sure appreciate your support through membership. There are a few perks to membership. Members get our quarterly newsletter, which is full of good information and great photographs, and members get access to our Practical Farmers email discussion lists. This list is one of the most valuable perks of membership, giving you instant access to thousands of supportive Iowa farmers. Many times, questions that are posed to the listserv get a great number of answers in just a short order. Tonight, when I end this meeting, I will send you to the Practical Farmers of Iowa website, and you can sign up there if you're not a member already. Also on our website, please check out our calendar of events. Notice that while the Farminars take a break, we've got plenty of online events coming up, including a new series of webinars dedicated to the spring management of cover crops. And without further ado, we'll get on to the Farminar. Tonight's Farminar will run about 1 hour, and then we hope to leave about 30 minutes for questions. Feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time. If I can put an arrow on the chat box here. No. Anyhow, my arrow won't go there. Feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time, and then we'll leave it up to Wendy and Erwin whether they want to answer those questions on the fly or put some of them off to the end. Also, as we get started, please put your name and your email address in the chat box to the left, which I see folks are doing right now. So like I mentioned, this evening's presenters are Erwin and Wendy Johnson. They operate Centerview Farms near Charles City, Iowa. It's a crop and livestock farm that has been in the family for 4 generations. They're going to share a little bit about what they do on their farm on an annual, biannual, and quarterly basis to ensure that they are profitable. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Wendy.
Okay. How do I get the PowerPoint up?
Here it comes for you.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Wendy Johnson, and my dad here is Erwin.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Just enjoying the fantastic weather that Iowa provides for us, up here in northern Iowa, at least.
So tonight, we are going to talk about, I guess, we're using our farm as an example of budgeting and what we do for our row crop and livestock farm. We have our farm is Centerview Farms Company. We're located in Charles City, Iowa, in Floyd County. we have about 1,100 acres of conventional corn and soybeans, 85 acres of grass, alfalfa grass, and pasture, and about 30 head of polypay sheep, which are very pregnant right now and are due in April. Tonight we're going to talk about basically three main items when we look at the okay, are we I just see a note that you can't hear us very well. Drake, can you hear us? Hello? Can you hear me now, Kevin? I don't even hear Drake anymore, so.
Oh, do you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I was trying to adjust. Apparently, it doesn't let you adjust at the same time.
Okay. I don't want to scream into the microphone, but I don't want to be too quiet either. So thanks for those comments.
I'll let folks turn it up. I'll turn my microphone down so I don't blast them out later. And mostly, I'll just be quiet.
Okay.
We better get up here close or something.
Yeah, keep letting us know if you can or can't hear us. So the three main parts of our presentation this evening that we'll go over are the cost of production, basically enterprise budgeting, a market plan, and a marketing plan, and Finpack. And within each of those areas, we're going to talk about the when, why, and how.
No, not yet.
So our cost of production, what we do for our farm is we do a preliminary budget, which is usually done in August or September when we're thinking about what we are going to grow and raise for the following crop year. And then we do a mid budget when we know our input costs. And currently, right now, we're in the mid period where we know our input costs and we can plug those exact numbers into our enterprise budgets to get a better idea of what our cost of production is. And then we have our post enterprise budget, which we do after harvest.
We know what our yields are, so we can divide the actual costs that we know that we've incurred by the number of bushels that we produce. A lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is probably pretty simple things. Or I hope they're simple because we want to talk about very basic concepts. I'm sure all of you also read a lot of the fantastic magazines that are put out for us, educational things such as Farm Journal, Wallace's Farmer, Top Farmer, Farm Futures. I mean, they're all really great tools. And it seems like right now we're in kind of a trendy period of talking about things that are new and different, and such as the use of drones, cover crops, data clouds, biotech advances, and of course marketing advice. And but what we're going to be talking about tonight are going to be pretty basic things, and we're going to use just one budget. We're going to show you one, and that will be the cost of production for corn in our operation. We would like you to, as we present this, we'd like you to, for some of you, it's probably going to be an oversimplification. For others, it may be the first time you're exposed to it. But believe me, what we're doing here is not rocket science. It's very, very basic. I've read a number of farm magazines that only approximately, everyone's different, but only about 50% of farmers know what their cost of production is. And we think that this is absolutely necessary to run a business that you know what your costs are, so that you can develop marketing plans, etc. The reason we start with the preliminary as early as we do is because a lot of it, depends on whether, in this case, let's say we're going to grow corn or soybeans. How many acres of beans are we going to plant? How many acres of corn are we going to plant? Are we going to plant any corn on corn ground? And so by putting a budget together and then looking at the price outlook of them, then we can decide early in the fall for what we're planning on doing the following year's production. And it'll give us an idea as we go through the fall, in the midst of harvest even, what our crop mix is going to be for the coming year. Also, we're going to talk about the reason why we need to have a budget is simply to determine what your selling price needs to be when you sell a commodity. And of course, always selling above what your costs are is the way you stay in business, profit. So anyway, that's what we're going to be talking to you about.
So we put together just some copies of things that we got on the internet. They're just samples of things that we use for budgeting purposes. One is, I'm sure you're all aware of through Iowa State University's extension through Ag Decisionmaker. If you go on to, or if you Google Ag Decisionmaker and look up costs of production or costs and returns, it comes up with this kind of chart that you can choose, your cost budgets and record summaries, or yields, or profitability. They're just really a slew of different options. And here, if I can use my pointer, we're going to be looking at estimated costs of crop production. We downloaded a PDF and actually hand filled it out. You can use the Excel version too, which I'll show you in the next slide, the Excel version. But if you are organic, they also have organic crop production enterprise budgets, which are a little bit different than ours because we're conventional. Your marketing strategies also might be a little bit different because you have contracts or 3-year contracts with a little bit more stability in your prices. So these are just some examples.
I might add that the University of Illinois, farmdoc.com, they're an excellent source. Kansas State also has budgets. Minnesota, the University of Minnesota, the Langwark College at St. Paul, they also have budgets. So we're going to use Iowa State's because it's put together by people that are local here for us in Iowa.
And you can see there's also vegetable production, developing budgets for organic crops, and making the transition. So, pretty useful stuff. This is Mike Duffy. He's been he's a PFI member and has been a great producer of these wonderful budgets. Him and Dr. Chase. Anyway, so these are some of the Excel documents or Excel spreadsheets that you can look at to create your enterprise budget. And this is what the Excel format looks like. And in the yellow boxes, you can plug in your numbers for your farm here. We like to keep it as simple as possible. Not that this isn't simple, but we're a pencil and paper group, and so we like to handwrite our enterprise budget. So we're not as high tech. But I put this up here because I just wanted to show that there are options that you can just plug in your information and it'll do all the math for you on an Excel spreadsheet. So this is our basic enterprise budget that we've taken, as my dad has said before, we've taken just corn. We're talking about low-till corn budget, and it's a corn following soybean rotation, and we're using 180 bushel per acre, and we're going to go line by line through this budget, this sample budget. Um, and if you have any questions about it, we're just going to show how we came to these numbers, and maybe you can fit them into your operation or compare them to your operation, and how you come up with your numbers.
In the first item, well, first off, I need to tell you what Mike Duffy and staff at the egg business or ag econ department, what they do is they project what they think the costs are going to be for the coming year, and that's the numbers you see that are typed in there. So those are, I'm going to call those the default numbers. Those are the numbers that Iowa State thinks statewide in an average operation. This is what the cost will be. If you do nothing more than just add those up or use them and don't want to do your own actual budgets on your own farm, that's probably okay. But for us, we decided, or we have always done this, we want to know our farm. It's very particular to our own operation. And so that's what we've penciled in here. And so I'm going to go down through these numbers rather quickly and just tell you where we come up with those numbers. On the pre-harvest machinery, we don't spend a lot of time differentiating between fixed and variable. Variable in this case would be those items that could be changed. That would be fuel, repairs, things like that. Where the fixed would be your depreciation of or what your cost of the machinery is on a per acre basis. I guess I'll have to get closer. Angela, you say I'm fading in and out. I'm 71 years old. I hope I'm not fading in and out yet. Anyway, on the cost of seed, what we do is in the fall, this budget we've got here is a mid term. In other words, we know what the production is. Excuse me, we know everything but what the production is. We already have got all our inputs figured out. So we order our corn usually in September, October, and which many of you do, and then we take that seed order, divide it by the number of acres we're projecting we're going to plant, and come up with a seed cost on a per acre basis. This is what we're doing on a per acre basis. The next item is our nitrogen. In this case, you would use either if you fall apply nitrogen, you know exactly what your costs are, or you get a price from your supplier and project how many units or how many pounds of nitrogen, actual nitrogen, you're going to apply, and then come up with a total on a per acre basis. Do you want to take the questions while we're at it?
Sure. Torre, I see your question about how much do these vary from year to year. How much? I was going to say a lot, but I didn't know. Percentage-wise?
Oh, I don't know. No, they vary. They vary. Sorry, they vary a lot in crop production. Largely because of a couple items that we'll get to here shortly. Because of the price of the inputs can vary, but mainly your land cost is a huge variable. So the answer is yes, they do vary. What a lot is, maybe we're talking, 50 cents a bushel would be probably an extreme change. Back to the nitrogen. If you know what you've actually put on or going to put on, then you've got the actual cost. And we know that because we've put on the majority of, not the majority, at least some of our nitrogen, and we know what the side dress cost will be because we've already paid for that nitrogen. On phosphate and potash, what we do is because we variable rate application, we take our total fertilizer bill, we divide it by corn and soybeans. This is our simple way of looking at it. And instead of going into great detail, we just take the total bill for phosphate and potash, and then we divide it by the crop acres that we have, and we treat that cost as being, even though we apply it every 2 years, once every 2 years, every year we're spreading about half of our potash and phosphate. So then in that case, what we do is we just spread it out. So every year we're putting in a cost for corn or for soybeans. So if we had a soybean budget, which is to your right there, our potash and phosphate, the way we do it would be the same price, $68.
We got a question here from Tori again. How they vary from Iowa State's numbers. Well, Iowa State's numbers are all along here. So these would be the variable costs. And for example, our estimate was 64, where Iowa State's for 180 bushel per acre was $57.64. Theirs
No,
was
that's nice.
nitrogen. Yeah. Phosphate and potash. Ours is 68, where theirs is 51 for variable. So you can compare here these numbers to Iowa State's numbers, which are right along here.
Let's wait till we get down to the bottom line, and you'll see how much it really does vary from their numbers. Okay, so lime. Lime, we spread our lime over, like a 5-year period. And if we put on a lot of lime, we spread it out over our acres and just put an average number. In this case, it's $10. Our herbicides, we plan a herbicide program. We go to our supplier and ask them for prices. Now we know what the actual price is. In the fall, we actually ask them for what they project their prices will be. In this case, we got $30 per acre. Crop insurance, we take our crop insurance bill from the previous year and then divide it by how many acres we're covering. We split that up between corn and soybeans because there is quite a difference in cost between the two. And we just divide the last year's cost for federal crop insurance and our hail. We put some hail insurance on our crops too. And we just divide that by our acres. So last year's number said it was $21 in our farm. Miscellaneous, we do apply NSERV on the fall applied nitrogen, and we have custom application of the nitrogen done. We hire it done, and those two costs are $24. Interest, in this case, if you have borrowed money, and if you only had one enterprise, you're growing only corn, you would just take the interest cost that you incur in a year's time and divide it by those acres. It gets a little more complicated when you have multiple crops. You don't know for sure which one is incurring the most money borrowed. In this case, I would split up the total borrowed, take it, multiply it times whatever your interest rate is at the bank, and use that divide it up on how many acres of corn you have or how many acres of beans. So you'd split it up between your crops and come up with what you think should be allocated for the harvest or for the interest on your farm. In our case, it's zero. Fortunately, over the years, we've had 4 or 5 really fantastic years, and so we don't need to borrow money to put our crop in, which is a nice position to be in. We've penciled in custom hire spraying. We sold our sprayer a couple of years, or about 5 years ago, and so we have co-op spray for us, and so we get $6.50 an acre times 2 times is $13. So if you add up the numbers we have here, our pre-harvest machinery with all the inputs we've got comes up to $385. Okay, now we go into the harvest season. The way I come up with a harvest number on the combine is we trade combines every year. It's called a combine roll. And I know what our trade cost is. I divide that by the number of acres that we run our combine over, including soybeans, and or if we're doing a custom work. And I divide that by the acres we've covered, and then I add in, I know that if we run our combine for, let's say, a 14-hour day and we can harvest, say, 50 acres, I multiply how many bushels or how many acres we get done, divide it into the value of the diesel fuel that we burn, and I add that to the cost per acre that we are when we trade our combines. So I know it sounds a little complicated. It's not. it's very simple actually. Last year was about $17 or $18 per acre for the combine roll difference trade price, and then I've added about $7 for fuel and repairs. Our grain carts and wagons, we use wagons. We don't have semis. We don't have actually, we don't have a grain cart, so it's wagons and tractor. We're guesstimating with fuel that we're in that $25 range, which is a little higher than theirs. On the LP gas number, we took the number of total gallons that we burned that we needed to dry our corn last fall, and then multiplied it times what the price was and divided it by the bushels, and then multiplied that times how many acres we had, and we come up with about $36 is what our LP gas bill was. And then we calculated about $8 for handling our grain and through the augers, and actually we're putting in also unloading the corn and into our wagons when we sell it again. So our total harvest machinery is $94. Iowa State calculates how many hours it takes to put in an acre of corn, which we've used here, and we're just using that number of $30. And I'll explain to you a little differently, in a little bit about how we actually do it a little differently, but we're using this number here. On cash rent, this is on the land that you would rent. We've just used their average number. This can be all over the place. If you're fortunate enough and don't have to pay, the $300, you put in whatever your actual number is. So if you would add the 385 plus the 94 and the 287, our total cost to put in an acre of corn is $796, as you can see on that screen. You simply take the 180 bushels. We're projecting that our bushels are going to be 100, or a yield is going to be 180 bushels. You take the 796 and divide it by 180 bushels, and you come up with $4.42 a bushel. Remarkably close to what Iowa State's numbers are. Now, there's one variable that we do that's a little bit different in our actual budget. We use this one to simplify it. We actually have a corporation, and all of our labor is hired. Wendy has her salary, I have my salary, and we have a couple other employees that work with us, part-time or full-time. And we know what our total labor cost plus benefits is for a year's time. And so in our case, we put in, when we're doing our own personal one, we put in what that total cost is for the corporation and divide it by how many enterprises we have, and then we divide by the acres we have. And that gives us instead of having to return to management labor, we know what our actual labor cost is, which goes directly to our bottom line. Now, questions?
Are there any questions on the enterprise budget section and the cost of production? This particular, I don't know if I said this, but this particular budget is for the mid. So now that we know what our input costs are, they're easier to plug in. We have the exact numbers here to plug into our enterprise budget. So this is a mid one. Post-harvest, we'll then do a post-harvest enterprise budget.
We actually had just about our average yields last fall. We were very fortunate, even with some prevent plant acres, we did average close to 180 bushels. But after the harvest, you would actually input, if we had 200 bushel corn, we would divide our total cost, fixed and variable cost by 200 bushel instead of 180, which would then lower our cost of production a little bit.
And when we're putting together this PowerPoint, we didn't really know if beginning farmers were going to be listening in, or organic farmers, or conventional farmers, so we just started putting out our information from our personal experience and using our farm as an example. of course, if you are organic or use cover crops or other types of farming methods, your enterprise budget is going to look different. But really, it's all about machinery, seed, harvest, planting, how much the cost of land is, labor. Those are really the basics when you're putting your budget together in the end.
We do the same thing for soybeans. We do the same thing for our sheep enterprise. We haven't been so religious about doing it in our hay production. But maybe we ought to be doing that too, because we do sell quite a few hundreds of tons of hay every year. But that one is a little less predictable than the corn and soybeans. And the corn and soybeans are the major enterprises that provide income to our corporation. And so but we do it for all of our enterprises except for the hay, I guess.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions about cost of production, and if you think of something, you can always ask it at the end of our presentation. We'll move on to marketing plan. So when we're talking about budgeting, the three things in the beginning that we wanted to talk about tonight are the cost of production, having a marketing plan, and Finpack, and the how, when, what, and how. And so the second portion of this is the marketing plan, which is always to sell above your cost of production. So if you remember this this number here of $4.42, we need to sell our corn above $4.42 on the land that we rent. So to do that, we have a lot of different options. And I shouldn't say options. What was the word you used?
Alternatives.
Alternatives. Okay, pricing alternatives to create our marketing plan. There's the cash price, forward contracting, HTAs, which are hedge to arrive contracts, basis contracts, futures, options, which are calls and puts. We also use the crop insurance as a variable for our marketing plan.
And we'll talk a little bit about how that is involved in a little bit.
And then other factors, and we were thinking maybe we should have put this at the top of our marketing plan, but for example, weather is a huge variable when it comes to your marketing plan. Competitor production and their exports.
Specifically, how is Brazil doing, and Argentina and the Ukraine doing in their production? What's weather? What their projected yields are?
Price outlook. We get a lot of that information from experts or economists. There are lots of groups out there that they aren't psychic about the prices, the commodity prices, but they follow trends, technical and fundamental trends.
Some of them are technicians, some of them are fundamentalists.
We also have to consider logistics and cash flow needs. When do you need the cash? Let's say you've got a loan and you need to make payment on that loan. So selling that corn, when do you need that cash? And your storage capacity. For us, we have to sell some of our corn off the field in the fall because we don't have the storage capacity to hold all of our corn in our bins. So that is a factor that we have to use when considering when to sell and using these alternatives as a way of pricing our crop.
So to be more specific, we have about our average production in our operation is in the range of 100,000 bushel. We'll just use that. we have enough storage on our farm for 80,000 bushel. So to use that first item in other factors, storage capacity, instead of hiring or renting commercial storage, we prefer to market a portion of our crop and have it sold at harvest. We deliver it right at harvest, and that helps us alleviate our storage capacity. It gives us some cash flow, so we have income to help us put in starting the inputs for the following year's crop. And so there's a lot of different reasons why these factors would come into play, and of course then that ties in, okay, how and when are we going to actually price the corn?
So the cash price, well, actually go back to the screen. We're just really going to talk about the basic ways to simplify the how we market our crop. I'm just going to go over cash pricing, forward contracting, and HTAs. These are other options, but we just don't have enough time to get into them this evening. But these are the basic alternatives.
Just for a definition, HTA is a futures fixed contract, or it's a hedge to arrive. That's what HTA is, hedge to arrive. And basically what we're doing with an HTA is we're capturing what's on the board of trade, the futures price, but not setting the basis on it. And we set the basis before we actually deliver the corn at a future date. So it allows us to capture a futures price without going on the futures market ourselves.
So cash price, we look at local elevator prices, our local ethanol plant price. We have an ethanol plant that is 5 miles?
3.5.
3.5 miles down the road. And so most of our corn gets delivered there. It's just a less distribution cost. We look at our local soybean processor, which is 35 miles away. And we also look at basis. And we always need to sell above cost of production. So I just put that in as a reminder. This is kind of blurry, so I've got to switch screens here. It's very quiet over there, Drake. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just on. I'm
Okay,
on
hope
mute.
everyone can still hear
You're doing
us.
great. You can feel free to zoom into that sheet too if you need to make it bigger to point out anything
Okay.
specific.
So this is just a sample elevator cash bid today. They had, these are at closing prices.
Well, the cash bids are right here.
Yeah.
The rest of them are all forward contracts.
Let me get my pointer here. Here's the cash bids are for the March 14th. We use this. This is just an example. We look at several different bids from different areas. It's different when you have organic because you've got a fixed price. Where in the conventional side, we pick our markets and they're much more variable. So. Seems like I can't move my arrow without moving the whole sheet. So we look at this sheet, or it's actually just online, and you can click on any of the underlines to see the basis for that. And I've got a basis sheet in the next slide. But we look at the futures price, which is above here. We look at, and I'm just going to look specifically at Valero. Valero is our, if you scroll down, which I can't do with my arrow.
See, futures prices up. So March is 484.
Anyway, here, because I couldn't get my arrow down, so I wanted to go to Valero. So if you go to Valero, the futures price is 484, but our cash price that we could get today, if we sold some bushels today, is $4.72. So we look at that. We also look at forward contracting, and forward contracting would be anything after March. So that'd be
This is
April.
for our old crop now. This is for 2013 production. We want to focus on 2014 production.
2014 production then would be anything after January. So we'd look at October, January, and March.
Right.
So we would look at Valero's bid for October, January, and March for 2014 production forward contracting. Hedge to arrives are when you want to capture the futures price, but you want to choose your own basis. And so you would look at, let me go to the next screen here.
I might add here while she's trying to get this up that we basically we're going to just talk about that 20,000 bushel that we want to find a home for. We want to price that corn. This is the 20,000 that we can't store on our own farm. And so basically we're saying we want to price it at harvest and not have to put it in a bin or have it stored anywhere, which means we need to deliver it right to the market. And so in this case, we're using the December 2014 new crop futures price to come up with a price for what they're willing to pay us right now. If we forward contract
it. Okay, so we're looking at the futures price of corn for October for 2014. And the futures price is $4.86. It has gone up 10 cents, but we're looking at a basis of 32 cents. If we were to look at January, they've got a basis of 31 cents, minus 31 cents, and in March a minus 29 cents. So this is really telling us that with a minus basis, this place, Valero, doesn't need our corn. And so they have widened out their basis. The narrower the basis, the better cost, better price you're going to get, and you probably want to capture that basis. But we would use an HTA for this example to capture the futures price, which for January and March is $4.93, but not set the basis.
So we would wait because we know the ethanol plant, the basis narrows up in general it narrows up as we get closer to the month when they need the delivery. So if we would sell December corn today, for example, at 486, which is an incredible price. I didn't expect we were going to get this high this soon, but it's a great day today. It's up 10 cents. So if we sold it on a HTA, we would sell it at 486, less the 5 cents a bushel that they charge for putting on a HTA. So we'd end up at about $4.81. That would be the futures price. And then we would wait until the summer or as we move into the fall, if there's some event or whatever, and they narrow up that basis, then we would call in and attempt to sell or to set the basis at something less than 32 cents. If we decide not to go with an HTA, We can contract at $4.54 today. We can forward contract for October delivery at $4.54. That's magically above our $4.42 a bushel, which means we're selling at a profit. Not very much, but we're selling a little bit above our cost of production.
Because if you remember, our cost of production is $4.42, so we want to make sure that we stay above that. Okay. I want to leave enough time for our Finpack, so we're a little bit behind, but I just wanted to touch on crop insurance and how we use crop insurance as part of our marketing plan. So crop insurance, the end of February, they came out with the price coverage for the 2014 crop year. And so it was determined the end of February that it would, for corn, it was $4.62, and for soybeans, $11.38. These are lower than last year's price guarantees.
They're just lower than last year's by over $1, which means that the total revenue protection will not be as great this year. So that makes us a little more conservative about selling our crop the 2014 crop.
The revenue guarantee levels for crop insurance are 50 to 85%. And so a lot of experts are telling us to use the 85% revenue guarantee levels to capture that. We need the price protection to transfer our risk. So that 85%, if that is going to be our guaranteed level, what happens to that other 15%? Because we can't protect 100% of our crop. So we have to put that into the mix of our marketing plan, and we need to set the price to transfer the risk and price out that 15%. And it's more like actually 75% because you add in.
You can't insure up to 85% of your total crop because our APH yields are not as high as our actual production usually is. It's close, but not as high. Another factor included here is that, and as it fits to just the example I told you, we have 100,000 of production. We only have room for 80, and if we price 15 to 20,000 now or this spring, in other words, prior to harvest, that magically then fits in with that we're going to have price protection on those bushels that are not insured. And it just works out for us that it's about the same amount. So that gives us another incentive to forward contract or price protect that portion of our crop that is not covered by our insurance. If we decide that this insurance, though, will allow us with a certain amount of stability to be able to market more than 20% or 30%. If we wanted to pre-price corn for next March, let's say, and get us up to 50%, we know that we have the revenue assurance protection that if everything fell out of bed, we would get the monies to be able to allow us to go out, and if we did not have the production, we had a total disaster in our crops, we'd be able to go out and buy corn to satisfy those contracts. So it gives you enough sense of confidence that you can pre-price or forward contract more corn than the 20 to 35%.
So if we think the prices will be lower in the fall, and we're going to have good yields and we're going to have good crops, then we need to look at pricing more aggressively our crop above our cost of production. And I just wanted to add in there too that crop insurance really has only been around for 5 or 6 years.
Maybe a little longer now.
And it used to just be disaster payments, which
we're very unpredictable. Yeah, depending on what Congress was willing to do after the fact. And we're great believers in this crop insurance. It's a great tool, and everybody needs to be involved with this thing. The other item that is that we have a very small window here. Now that we've established what our price coverage are going to be, it's really imperative that all of us that want to have crop insurance, we need to apply for it immediately. Actually, in the next 2 weeks here. Actually, it's like 10 or 11 days, and so you need to get next to your insurance agent as quickly as you can. So we also need to point out is the higher, just as a revenue guarantee levels, the higher the level of that you select, let's say 85, the about 75% usually is about where the federal government subsidizes most of that rate. When you go to 85, it's a lot more of your own insurance from your own cash. So, but this is a year maybe that a higher level of protection or guarantee, is needed.
And I believe, at least from the reading that I've done, that organic growers are gaining some crop insurance options. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I see Dan Wilson is on here, but I believe there are. It's been a growing concern, and I think they've made some changes in that farm bill that recently came out in 2014 about organic growers or organic growers.
Tori asked a question: Is there coverage for hay and other crops besides corn and soybeans? There's protection. My knowledge is there's protection for the major crops: wheat, corn, soybeans. I don't believe that there's coverage for the vegetable crops, or I don't believe maybe there is any for hay. There's somebody that knows that for sure. We did not even investigate, or we haven't investigated yet, trying to protect our hay. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, Drake says for vegetables there's SNAP. And again, we use Ag Decisionmaker as a tool. They have in their file A154. You can just Google Ag Decisionmaker revenue protection or crop insurance, and they put together basically an explanation of our crop insurance. This last was updated February 2011. I noticed, but basically the same verbiage is the same for today.
There are changes though, so you'd have to get next to your insurance agent to find out specifically what those are.
And so they on the revenue or the crop insurance section of Ag Decisionmaker, they have some examples of, and we won't get into it too long, but they have examples of lower price and a lower yield, and a lower price and a normal yield, and a higher price and a low yield, and what crop insurance would do. And so we were going to take a look at this example because more than likely this year, 2014, we'll have a lower price, but we'll have a lower price, but we'll have a normal yield. And so if you're interested, you can go through this example. We're not going to take too much time tonight. We only have a few more minutes to get through our Finpack presentation, but it's a good resource. Okay, Finpack. What is Finpack? How do you use it to make decisions, and when to use Finpack? Well, my dad has used Finpack for quite some time, and he used to work for Iowa State Extension, and he can tell you a lot more about what he used to do. But these are the three things that we really want to cover about Finpack tonight.
My understanding is that there was a Farminar on on one of your presentations here previously, so we're not going to go into any great details on it. But I worked for Iowa State University from 1985 during the farm crisis up till 2005, and what we use is we use the software that the University of Minnesota, the Ag Economics Department puts out. They created it, and anyway, I was trained during that time frame to be able to use it to help farmers, educate them better on what their finances were and are. The way we're still using it today, though, the software that the University of Minnesota puts out, there's a number of them. There's FinLearn, which is long-range budgeting. There's FinAn, which is financial analysis. There's FinFlow, which is cash flow. And what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about, briefly tonight, about how we use FinLearn, or how do we use the Finpack software in our own operation. An example would be, let's look at FinLearn as that's the only one I'm going to talk about tonight. It's a long-range budgeting tool. And what it does is it allows us to do a couple things. We can do what I call a health checkup in our own operation. We can look at a basic, maybe a typical year in our operation. The FinLearn will allow us to look at four things. It allows us to look at what our net worth is, what our liquidity is, how profitable our business is, and then there's a sensitivity analysis where they take away either some price or some production, and how does that affect the net worth, liquidity, and profitability if you lose 10% of a crop, for example. So how do we use this FinLearn? Well, one way of doing it is just to, like I said, we'll just make a basic plan. You have to create a net worth. It's all in the software package. You have to input your budgets, which if you followed us and you've done these budgets, you just simply take our budgets off of our enterprise budgets that we talked about previously and input them into the format that FinLearn uses. Then we create a net worth statement, we put in our budgets, and then we have to make some assumptions about how much labor and that sort of thing we have available. But the way we've used them, Wendy, if you go back to the purposes that we use it for example, we look at our base plan and where our business is at today. The way that FinLearn is such a good decision-making tool is that it will allow you to make a second run right next to your base plan. For example, Wendy decided to come back and she asked and wanted to come back and farm with us. Swept me off my feet when she made that decision about 3 years ago. But the first thing I did is, okay, I don't want to create a problem for our business. We'll let our business handle having Wendy and her husband Johnny come back and farm with us. Is there enough profit? Is there enough liquidity? Can we handle it? And so we did a Finpack and included only the one change. We didn't increase our acres. We didn't do any changing in our enterprises. The only thing we did is added her salary into our operation. And so we create enough profit, in other words, to handle it. Another example would be as if you would want to add a livestock enterprise into your business, and or maybe you want to purchase land or some equipment, and every time you add another run, you would compare it back to your base plan. And so the reason why Finpack and FinLearn specifically is such a great tool is that it allows you on paper to put numbers there that you can compare to your base plan and say, okay, if Wendy comes back to farm with us, will it make our business more profitable? How will it affect our cash flow? Will we still be able to make all our loan payments, etc.? And still, in other words, will we plan for success? If we had found out that our business didn't have enough scope or enough scale, in this case, we'd have to figure out, okay, if she is going to come back, then how are we going to increase the size of our operation? In our case, because I'm in my retirement years or getting close to it, it was pretty easy, and we're in a transition from her and me, and I'm getting less salary and she's getting more.
I put in an example of a FinLerb, just to show you what it looks like. We won't get into it very much because we've reached our time limit. But I'm just setting it up here, just so you can see what it looks like. It's not. This is just a sample. It's not our specific FinLerb, but it shows an executive summary, your profitability, income statement, and you would get all this information printed off from your software package. And what we suggest is, instead of purchasing the Finpack software, which you can do, I believe it's $350, I think, for the files, the Finpack
The
software.
producer level, they have professional and they have producer level.
Yeah, the producer level would be $350. You can actually contact your farm management specialist through Iowa State Extension in your area. I think they're by region. So we have like a northeast region farm management specialist, and he or she will actually run a Finpack for you as a free service. At least the last time we did it, when we added an employee, it was free. So that was just a year ago.
It would be helpful to have an expert, someone that's gone through it a number of times, to sit down with them. It's extremely helpful if you have someone that knows what they're doing to go through it the first time. After you've done it, and if you did get your own software, that I would do it after I'd actually had someone run a FinLerb or a Finpack software package for you. Then you can decide whether you want to invest in it yourself.
Okay, so let's see if I go back to my PowerPoint. So we wanted to cover this evening our cost of production and using enterprise budgets, and our marketing plan, how we create a marketing plan and what are those variables and factors. And then we want to talk about Finpack and how we use that to do major adjustments, or use that when we make major adjustments to our operation. So questions? Does anyone have any questions?
We have a couple here I can answer. Tori Wilson asked, we were wondering how much our numbers vary from Iowa State numbers. In general, the actual numbers, not the example we gave you, we're usually a little bit less, and that's because we do not, our labor costs we figured our numbers a little bit differently, and we do not have money borrowed, and so our costs usually are a little bit less than Iowa State's. If you're paying high cash rents or land rental, we actually make two budgets. We do one for the land that we own, and we do one for the land that we rent. And I can tell you that the ones where we rent the ground are significantly higher than the ones that we own because our land is paid for.
Yeah, that's another question.
Okay. The farm bill. Is the farm going to offer an option to buy at a higher level of coverage?
He's saying that.
Well, the farm bill is something totally different from crop insurance. I mean, farm bill includes crop insurance. There is going to be, I'm told, we don't know for sure yet till the regs get all written, but we don't know for sure exactly what the crop insurance, I don't mean crop insurance, what the farm bill protection is going to be, if any. But we do know there'll be some. And so our decision until because we have to sign up in the next 2 weeks, I think our decision is going to be, we're going to go for the highest level of coverage that we can get, even if it does cost us a little more. I think we need to protect that revenue this year with lower prices. And the outlook for lower prices for our commodities. And we won't know for sure what the farm program is going to provide probably for another few months. Maybe I've heard up to 6 months from now. So we're going to cover what we can, what we know we can do at a maximum level, and then we'll see with the farm bill if there's any other benefits there for us later.
Well, I just put up a slide of the resources that we used to make this presentation. Ag Decisionmaker through Extension, Finpack, the University of Minnesota, and our cost of productions, which are part of Ag Decisionmaker.
We have a question, Wendy. Do we always watch budgets closely? Answer that one. Do we watch them closely?
Watch prices closely.
Do we watch our budgets closely?
Enough? Closely enough? Probably.
We do them 3 times. We do them, like we said earlier. We do the preliminary. That helps us make a decision on when we're going to, what crop mix we're going to have. We do them after in the fall, usually after the harvest, we sit down, we know we're starting to order chemicals and seed and all that. Then we put in those actual numbers. So we do it then also. And then after the harvest, we do it a 3rd time. The answer is, I look at them often. I mean, I do know what our numbers are. If things change, I put in the new numbers. And for us, it's either, we can take an eraser and put in the actual cost and come up with a number. So
we always know what our cost of production is.
Yeah.
And that number's.
We're very diligent about doing that. Or did something spur more active budgeting at some point? Any change, like if you're looking at renting land in the fall, maybe it's even before, a lot of land ground changes place right around September 1st. In that case, you would definitely want to do a preliminary enterprise budget and look at that number, whatever the landlord's asking for as far as rent. You would want to project what your cost would be plus what the rent is going to be to give yourself at least a reasonable idea of what your costs are going to be when you rent that ground. If it's way overboard, if you're, for example, this year, if you've done it last fall, and the outlook is saying that we're going to have $4 plus corn, you sure would want to tie yourself into a position where your land rent was, let's say, $400 an acre, and your cost of production is going to be up in that, $5 and $6 range. That's just a recipe for losing money. And so you either want to renegotiate in that case with your rental, but that would be helpful to get an idea of what you could afford to pay rent on that land.
I don't see any other questions.
Great. This is all great stuff. Are there any more questions out there that didn't get answered in the process? Is there anything, Wendy, that you wanted to revisit that maybe you didn't feel like you had time to before?
The Finverb stuff?
Maybe.
That's a nightmare. I didn't know.
We kind of skimmed over the FinLerb only because it's a whole nother 5-hour presentation by itself. So we didn't really go into detail, and I'm not sure if we have enough time to go through it tonight. But I don't know if anyone has any specific questions about Finpack or FinLerb. I guess it's an opportunity to ask anything.
What we actually do, because when I retired working with Iowa State, I had to return my computer that they had provided to me. Plus, they wanted me to include all the software and everything with it. And so now today we do not own our own Finpack software. We have just in the last month have investigated and I'm fairly certain that we are going to get the software. Our problem is that we have an iMac computer, an Apple computer here at our farm business, and everything that Finpack has is for desktops, and so
PCs.
or PCs, personal PCs. So we're not. We need to figure out how we can use our iMac and get the software and use it ourselves. But that's because I've got the past training. But definitely, if you have a decision you need to make and you're wondering how it's going to work, it's a great opportunity to use the Finpack software. And I would contact your area farm management specialist up here in Northeast Iowa. It's Kristen Schulte. She's out of the Cresco, I believe, the Howard County office. And she has run actually 2 Finpacks for us, 2 Finware runs for us. One when Wendy and Johnny want to come back, and then we ran a second one when we have my cousin came to work for us too. And so we've done a couple times. But remember, it's a decision-making tool. Transitioning to the next generation. Do you have any non-farming children to consider as well? There's 2 issues. Transitioning the business is one issue, and that's what Wendy and I are in the process of doing. The other is estate planning, and the answer is yes. We are on an ongoing discussion of redoing our. My wife and I do have estate plans. And but now that Wendy's come back, we need to revisit those and reevaluate how we're going to treat. We have one daughter that lives out in California. She's a businesswoman out there, and our second daughter is Wendy, who's farming with us. So the answer is yes. We will be needed to consider both of their needs to in the future as far as our estates go. And we have expert help that we're going to be dealing with and hiring to help us get through that process.
But in relation to like Finpack, it's not an element.
Probably not a Finpack is not an estate planning.
Okay, any more questions out there?
Doesn't seem like it.
Anything
I hope
more
we
you'd
didn't
like
bore
to add?
everybody and
Yeah,
make everyone go away.
Budgets take a little while to sink in. They got to think about it a while. Well, I would tell everybody out there in the audience, I'll put my email address up, and if questions come to you in the next little while, feel free to drop me an email, and I'll make sure to get it to Wendy and Erwin and then get a response back to you.
We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this sort of thing. When I've given presentations, this is not exciting stuff normally, except that if it's really, really necessary. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to do enterprise budgets in your business, and so you know what your costs are. It gives me personally, it gives me a great comfort level, and in marketing, when I know what my costs are and I know what I'm selling it for, what it's above my cost of production. Like just one real quick personal story about how I do this. When I first started farming, about the same stage of my farming career that Wendy's in, my second year, I bought and fed 80 head of cattle. The first year I bought them, it was a lot of hand labor back in the early 70s. And I kept records, and I ended up making $25 the first year. Boy, I thought, gee, this is a lot of work for all that. And so I then bought the cattle the next fall, and I fed them out. And the next year I broke even. I didn't even make my $25. So I thought, boy, this has got to change. And so I moved into hog production, and that was an absolute fantastic decision to make. I wouldn't have made it probably as quickly if I hadn't kept those records the first couple of years and found out that I wasn't able to make money feeding cattle the way I was set up. And so that's been a lifelong plus for me. And I've used the budgeting ever since that time, and helping me even with my hogs or with the sheep and all of that. So anyway, it's been fun tonight. You know, we've enjoyed it, and I hope maybe you've learned a little bit from us too.
Thank you very much for your time. It's been great and informative and lots to think about.
I see Tori's typing something. Oh, thanks. Yeah, thank you for letting us share and appreciate you guys listening. Do we sign off, Drake, or how do we?
Yep, that would be great if nobody else is coming in. I'll give it a minute and I can shut the room down and send folks to the website. But you should be good. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Drake.